This episode of the Party Loaded podcast is proudly sponsored by Audible.com. Check out their awesome catalogue of audiobooks with over 180,000 titles to choose from. And be sure to grab a free audiobook on us and support the show by visiting audibletrial.com/endgame.
Let's party.
Hey everybody, welcome to Party Loaded. It is episode 193. We are chatting about everything great in the world of video games, and my name is Luke Retallick. We have tonight the fire team. We've got the entire Party Loaded fire team present, and I'm going to introduce Eyes Up, Mr. Matt Diet. What's going on, Gang Dad?
Hi, yes, I'm here. My eyes are up.
You're here. Your eyes are up. All right,
Yep.
Are your eyes up, Adrian Shear?
Yes, they are. Good evening, valiant listeners.
I like that one.
Eyes glazed over but up, Christian Paulson Brown.
Yes, I am here. Yes, good to be here as always. Thank you. Don't know why my eyes are glazed over, but
Yes, I am human man. Yes.
Nice. All right, well, we'll see if anyone can guess where that's leading to. But Adrian, you're back after a week or so off, and I think you've wasted no time in pumping time into games. That's for sure.
Well,
I've been seeing you online a lot.
Yeah. So I wasn't going to talk about it because I'm somewhat ashamed. But
Hey,
well, you know, long story short, Destiny 2. I got back into it, and I've been playing it a lot. That's it. That's all I really want to say because I feel ashamed and like I've betrayed my clan of supporters that were like, yes, Adrian, boycott Destiny. But now I gave in and I'm playing it a lot, and it's good.
Yeah.
I must admit, I didn't know what to expect. Look, let's get one thing straight right from the get go. The only reason I decided to boot up Destiny 2 was because, like I said, I fixed my computer and I was like, I need to play like a really snappy, smooth first-person shooter to really put it through its paces.
I do remember that being the recommendation that finally got in your ear.
Yeah, so then I was like, okay, all right, let's have a look at Destiny 2. And and I'm not exaggerating at all. That afternoon, I logged in and out 5 times. Like, I logged in, was just completely overwhelmed by the amount of like random shit. And I was like, what is that? What is that buzzword? Where do I go to do this? And like, I remember just running around in circles for like the first hour and like having to like Google guides for almost everything.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really off-putting, like severely off-putting. So I could have just as easily been talking about a totally different game this week. But in the end, I stuck with it, and I admit there's so much more to do than when I first played, and it grabbed me so much that I even got the annual pass to enjoy all of it. And the main thing that I think is worth mentioning is that it's way easier to just achieve goals and to make progress every time you log in. Well, it was back when I was playing it, which was just before Forsaken, like up to Forsaken before it was released. It just felt really hard to make any kind of progress doing anything, and like it just felt like you were just grinding the same thing over and over again and not achieving anything. But now, because of the way the game has kind of released its content, there's so much to do in a week that you can't even get it all done. Like there's so many things to do that you can't even your side quest, your list of side quests is as long as your arm, and you can only do a certain few each night, and all of them usually have pretty good rewards. So that's the highest praise I can give it at this point. So and one thing I've really enjoyed is the game has exotic gear, which is like your legendary drops for those playing at home. And these items, in the past, they were just kind of things that randomly dropped and you picked it up. But there's a handful of these exotic items where you need to do like a big long series of missions or quests or objectives to get them. And I've done a couple lately, one of which was with Luke and Matt, you guys, last night, which are really enjoyable. They're like these like platforming puzzle dungeons, I think was the word that was used to describe them.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and they're really fun. They're like miniature raids. And they really sort of sold me. I was really enjoying a lot of those. You can't do them on your own. You kind of need at least one other person. So, yeah.
I have an important question, though.
Yeah.
That is Destiny 2 versus Warframe. Where are you at?
Oh, Warframe. Oh, my
Good,
God. Don't
good.
even.
Okay,
don't
thank
even.
you.
Dude, don't. Yeah, no.
I will concede Warframe has fucking guitars in it now. So, yeah, that's pretty cool.
No, Warframe hands down. But I kind of am. I also tried logging into Warframe, but Warframe was already running at like 200 FPS.
Yeah.
Like before I fixed my computer problems. So that alone wasn't enough to pull me in. But yeah. I am enjoying it, and I can see myself enjoying it far more, like sticking with it like longer, and maybe like jumping back into it with a bit more regularity rather than just abandoning it as soon as I get into it like last time. So yeah.
I think it's entirely fine to settle in a position where you can appreciate that both games fucking rock.
Yeah.
It's just they're both good for different reasons.
Yeah, you're right. One just rocks harder. That's. Yeah.
I think it is actually worth talking about the whole evolution that Destiny's gone through, though, since Curse of Osiris and the Mars expansions, where you would have played last, like
they were shit.
They were really shit. They were massively grindy.
They were garbage.
And like you were basically just doing tasks week over week to try and get a decent gun, and there was no guarantees of what you'd get. Whereas they've changed their whole methodology, which I find really interesting, where now like getting that really good gun is really easy to do. But whether or not it is the perfect role you want or anything like that, that is harder to get. So you get a reward every week. It might not be exactly what you want, and that gives you reason to keep on doing that mission to try and get the exact thing you want. And I like that change.
It's very easily summed up, like in one sentence. And all it is that logging into the game now, it's what I would have expected it to be at launch. That's it. That's all it is. Like Destiny 2 now, from having just played it pretty much non-stop for the last 2 weeks, I'm enjoying it now the way I would have wanted to enjoy it when it first came out. That's all it is. That's for anyone who's like thinking about getting back into it. That's all I would say, is that it feels like a full proper game now. That's how it is.
It's got a lot of polish, and I remember how hard you went at it back when we were in launch territory as well. Like you devoured the shit out of it back then.
Well, that's Adrian with all games.
That's true.
Yeah. But I mean, more so with some, and I think this was definitely one of those more so. So yeah. But cool. I super enjoyed that mission last night. We had a real good time, and I didn't think we'd beat it as quick as we did. Like we got in and we sort of said, how many times through do you think it's going to take us to beat this? And I was willing to settle on about half a dozen. Adrian calls 2, and I'm just like, yeah, fucking good luck, champ. And then we did it on the second try, and I'm like, holy shit,
vindication.
Yeah, that was epic. It was a really good run too. Like we kicked ass on that run.
Yeah,
so,
it was fun. It was good.
Yeah, it was fun, guys.
Yeah.
Adrian, you'll get to do this one too, Adrian. I'm sure of it.
I just remember. I've already Christian.
Senior moment.
I do really think that Christian would enjoy it purely because it's. I think anyone would enjoy it. To be honest, I don't think it's specifically a Christian thing. I think that Sorry.
I was going to say, I anticipate that I would. Like, from what you've told me, it's like jumping puzzles, and it's not just like bullet sponge enemies, and then that's it. So there's like
you're on a clock, and the environments for this particular mission are just really out there, like way wild compared to the normal sort of areas in the game. So it's scenically stunning and challenging, and you're always under pressure on this thing. There's a section where you have to outrun a fucking cleaning robot. It's just nuts.
I have booted up Destiny 2 again recently, and I did buy Forsaken and the annual pass, but it's just my time scale for playing it is much more like slower. So I'll be chipping away a little bit to Destiny 2, and it'll probably take me a long time to catch up. I know that there is the Shadow Keep thing coming out where you can get like a 750 power character straight away, but I kind of feel like leveling up my character to that point still, even without that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd recommend doing that anyway. Then you get to experience a lot of the content, and like, and like it's no surprise that the main drive in Destiny 2 is still increasing your power level.
Yeah.
So the whole point is still just to grind to get better gear. So if you do that level skip thing, you're just eliminating half the reason to play, in my opinion. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. It doesn't block you off from a lot of those activities later on, but yeah, no, I totally understand.
It does.
I think,
one thing that, because I read about it, and when you get that character, it counts all of the previous expansions as already completed. So you can't do Forsaken. You can't do, mainly just Forsaken or like the Curse of Osiris or Warmind if you want to do those. Like it actually...
It's what alts are for, Christian.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no, I get you. I totally agree. Yeah. Well, as of today, there's a good chance that Jam might be jumping in back as well. So, yep, we'll see. We'll see how that goes. Yeah. Look, I'll just quickly chat about my week in gaming because it pretty much has been all Destiny. I tried my damnedest to put it down and play some Control so that I could chat about it tonight with Matt, but Iron Banner just got its hooks in me deep this week, and I just couldn't stop playing the damn thing. And I managed to finish all of the Iron Banner sort of quest line to get my full suit of armor. So I feel like I've achieved something. I feel satisfied. I don't feel bad at all, particularly because I know that Controls reportedly had some issues on some of the consoles, and I'm hoping that by the time I start playing, maybe that'll be a little smoother. But yeah, we will see. But Matt, I'm super keen to hear about how you went during this week with it. So
yeah, okay. So
do tell.
Spoilers: I played Control and I finished Control.
Oh, geez, you've done already. Holy crap!
Like there comes a point in that game. I mentioned this to others, but there comes a point in that game, like in the third chapter, where the game just gets its hooks in you like a good book, and you're like, I can't put this thing down until I resolve this thing. And then you resolve that thing, but something else happens. And basically what ended up happening was I played it on Sunday with the intent of just putting in a couple of hours. And then a couple of hours turned into basically my entire day just finishing off Control. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. The game has its problems, namely I was playing on PS4. The frame rate on PS4 will sometimes drop below 10 frames per second. It is awful. It is really bad. It was massively frustrating because like you're in the middle of a fight and the frame rate would drop, which meant that all your button presses and everything would be delayed and you would die and it'd be like, fucking hell, this is pissing me off. So it wasn't great in that respect, but that's what I get for being on PS4 rather than on PC. I should have just bought it on PC, but I love it. I love the game. Like, overlooking all those technological issues and the frame rate issues and everything like that, it is really, really good. The only other problem I'm going to mention before I actually start getting into the good parts is there's some really, really frustrating fights in the game. Like boss fights and fights with certain enemies where it just feels unfair. And when you die, like, you don't go back to a point that's necessarily close to where you were fighting. There's these things in the game world that are checkpoints, basically. And you activate them, which means that if you die during a boss fight or during like a jumping puzzle or something like that, you will go back to the nearest checkpoint, which can often be like 5 minutes away from where you were fighting. So you will have to actually go back there on foot, fight through all the enemies on the way there, and then get back into it.
It's like 1980s video gaming.
Now, that is actually an apt comparison, just because the level design reminds me of, like, well, not 1980s so much as 1990s, like, first-person shooters. Because all the interiors are super boxy and blocky and everything. There's a brilliant thread on Twitter that I recommend reading by Megan Fox, who's one of my game developer acquaintances / friends over in the United States. Where she basically does this incredibly cool job of breaking down how Control was built in such a way to benefit the gameplay, which basically means that the environments aren't particularly detailed so that they can give you this really cool fantasy of literally tearing chunks out of the walls around you to throw debris at enemies. And it's this really cool effect. Like, it just feels fantastic. There's a lot of people that have been making comparisons to the SCP universe. Like,
definitely,
that is absolutely there. Like, you can see a lot of influence from that. But it's
SCP. Sorry,
SCPs. So have you never heard of SCPs, Luke?
I'm sure, I have a feeling it's an acronym that I'll understand.
Contain, protect.
I don't.
It's basically like it's a collaborative horror wiki.
Yeah.
Where there's like a fictional organization that is kind of like the X-Files, where they're about like securing and containing and protecting like possessed objects or like weird supernatural objects or creatures. And it's like people write their own like stories about like, oh, there's this cave that if you go into the cave, then you can you'll come out in hell, or like there's or sometimes
there was an old TV series that came out with Gillian Anderson in it, which sounds very much like
maybe
that, Ellie.
Yeah. It was a thing in like the late 2000, like the late aughts. It was mostly popular then, but some of them are like genuinely good horror short stories, and some of them are just stupid. Like there's one that's a coffee machine that can produce any liquid in the universe out of it. Yep. That's all it is. And there's one that's my favorite is a toaster that can only be referred to in the first person. And that's it. That's all it is.
So those kinds of objects exist in Control as well, and they are freaking hilarious.
So hang on, if it's only referred to in the first person, what was its name? Or just toaster?
I don't know.
I must know.
It's been a long time.
There are hundreds of short stories in the SCP wiki. It's actually worth reading them because they're very good.
I also sometimes ask people to put bread in me.
So yeah, that whole comparison is actually really, really good. But I would say that it deviates enough from that to kind of be its own and not an SCP game. So the whole story basically follows this character. She turns up to this building called the Federal Bureau of Control. And so the Federal Bureau of Control is basically that universe's SCP foundation, where they exist to take all of these supernatural objects and contain them. And
her name is Jessie Faden, isn't it? That's such a badass name. It's
really good. Yeah.
Yeah.
So she's there because she's looking for her brother. And the way that they deliver the story is so fucking good because she has this literal internal monologue where she's speaking to this creature in her head. Because she's basically put it this way: the Federal Bureau of Control have been watching her and hunting her down because she was a part of this altered world event, they called them. And she got possessed by something. And now that's basically what allows you to do all the fighting in this building. But basically, when you get there, it's under lockdown, something's broken out, and you basically have to help them contain it and regain control over Control. So, also trying to find your brother, because that's basically the whole purpose that she's there for. Now, while the SCP kind of comparison is really, really apt, I think there is a more apt comparison, and that's Half-Life. Because so much about the facility feels like Black Mesa, and it's freaking great. Like, I love kind of running around and going through these corridors, and it's like, it all feels like it's part of this gigantic, infinite structure. So, this is not really spoilers, but the building that you're in is basically like a TARDIS almost. In New York City, you can only find it if you want to find it. So people that aren't aware of this of the Federal Bureau of Control cannot find the building. And the building's interior will just shift and change based upon whatever the Bureau actually needs them to be.
It's very Harry Potter.
Yeah. And so the whole building just feels weird, and a lot of the terrain in it doesn't make any sense. Like, even in the areas of the building that are actually, like, not been made weird by the objects that the Bureau actually controls in there. Yeah, the narrative of the game is freaking great. This is totally not a spoiler. It's actually a really cool thing, and you find little snippets, but it takes place in the same universe as Alan Wake, which makes total sense.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yep.
Yeah.
So they reference the whole fact that, and this is spoilers for anybody that's not played Alan Wake, but Alan could write stories and make them reality. So he's referenced as an object the Federal Bureau of Control has actually had to deal with in past.
Is it him or the typewriter?
I think it might be the typewriter.
Yeah, I remember reading that. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, it's a super cool crossover. They also have another reference in there. I can't remember what to. It was one of their other games. Oh, yeah, it was. It might be Max Payne?
Quantum Break's the other big one.
Yeah, I definitely think
I read that there's some connection to Max Payne in there, but I don't know.
Yeah. But either way, like, It is really, really cool. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm not sure yet if it's actually going to be one of my games of the year. It's definitely up there just for the narrative component. But I'm super looking forward to the DLC. Like, there's some areas that the game introduces you to that just by themselves are super fascinating. And then it turns out that one of those areas is actually like the topic of the first DLC. So I'm hyper excited for that because it was just one of those things where you get down there and it's like, this is so fucking weird. I want to know more about it. So yeah,
right.
It's a really good game.
Have Remedy mentioned any sort of like schedule for the DLC releases or?
Not as far as I'm aware. It might not. If I remember rightly, they had actually done a blog post basically saying, you know, yes, the DLC is coming out fairly soon, but this is why it's DLC and not included in the base game to kind of assuage those fears that a lot of gamers have about, you know, getting ripped off. But yeah, like I think it might be a month or two away, so we'll see.
Oh, it's pretty soon. Cool. All right. Well, in the meantime, it seems like another game that we might want to check out, or at least hear from Christian.
My turn.
Yeah.
So
is yours?
I've been playing a game that it does also involve containing like ethereal threats, and that's Astral Chain. So this is the latest outing from Platinum Games on the Switch. In the
studio that you totally loathe and just don't have anything to do with.
Probably my favorite studio in existence. They're known, if of course, for their like third-person character action games with their like stylish combat and crazy action, like Bayonetta and Revengeance and stuff like
Legend
that.
of Korra.
Legend of Korra. We don't talk about the Activision games. They're not good. But Astral Chain is really good. So for the first couple of hours, I was a little worried about it because it takes a while before it fully lets you like experience everything the combat system has to offer. Like at first, there's not a lot of like options, and the combo strings are really simple. But piece by piece, the game slowly adds layers on top of layers into the combat system until it's like super satisfying and fun. So like. It's hard to explain because it has this whole system where you're actually controlling two characters at once. So you've got your main protagonist, and then you have a series of they're called legions. They're like bound. There's like a mysterious alien threat called the Chimera, and it's not Gears of War, but they're also called the Chimera. And then you're part of like a secret organization that is able to like use these astral chains to bind them and control them, and then use them against themselves. And
like
you can,
it's like a Pokeball in chain form. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
It is.
Adrian and I, our minds went to the exact same place at the same moment.
They even can like sort of appear out of these weird little balls. So it is very much like that. It's also like it reminds me a lot of Evangelion as well, because it is like using these aliens and like slapping armor on them basically, and then like controlling them and using them against themselves. And they're constantly fighting against their bonds, and like it makes you feel like the bad guy, because even just like their idle animation, you're standing there and then the Legion will be like floating next to you as like a humanoid figure, and it's like shuddering and like pulling at its like armor and like kind of trying to break out, but it can't. But and like it shows you from cutscenes and stuff that happens in the story that like the moment it could break free from its chain, it would just like kill you immediately. Like it hates you, but you're like controlling it.
Yeah, I would.
Yeah. And like, so you have a bunch of different legions that you can cycle through, and each one has different like specialties. Like there's one with swords for arms, there's one with bow, there's one that's like a giant wolf, which I love. And they all have different combat options, and they also have different like exploration options, where each of them, it's kind of like getting items in a Zelda game, where as you traverse the world, there'll be like a super heavy door, and then if you have like the beefcake legion, like the tank legion, then you can rip the door open. Or if there's something buried underground and you have the wolf legion, then you can dig that up. And so by like replaying certain missions or like finding hidden areas, you can there's like a good deal of environmental exploration in it too, which is pretty unusual for Platinum games. Like it's really only been near Automata that had kind of open worldy sections and side quests and all that sort of business. But Astral Chain does. It's quite fully fleshed out. And it also has like downtime sections where you alternate. You're like kind of a police officer, and you alternate between going out on a mission and then going back to the police headquarters and then talking to all the characters there, doing your upgrades, customizing your legions. You have to clean your legions when you get back from a mission. They've got like red gunk all over them, and you have to actually like clean them off. And then they it's very Japanese.
Kids, clean your legions.
Yes, yeah.
It's like when you take the boat out on the weekend and you get back, you have to spend longer cleaning it than you did out on the
It
water.
reminds me of like Pokemon Ami, like where you're like rubbing their faces. It reminds me of that.
Oh no! Please don't say that. That's terrible. I hate that system.
No, it's good. The game.
It's really not.
The game oozes like sort of campy Japanese aesthetic. Like the setting is this like I'd say cyberpunk, but it's that like 90s anime like Tokyo punk where it's not like grimy like a lot of cyberpunk is. It's just lots of neon and like ridiculous clothing and like deep bass music, that sort of stuff. Very like Ghost in the Shell or Bubblegum Crisis kind of.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I got the Bubblegum Crisis feel immediately from the
more
trailers.
Bubblegum Crisis, yeah. And the story is just batshit like anime crazy. Like it's there's no sort of real like serious depth to or like meaning, like powerful message or anything in this game. It's just ridiculous anime action, and I love it.
So, Christian, your recommendation based on the fact that I haven't played a whole bunch of Platinum games, but I did really enjoy Devil May Cry 5, is this for me?
I think you could very much enjoy it, Luke. I think that having to like you need to put a good number of hours in before you can fully appreciate the combat system in this game compared to like Devil May Cry 5. I've actually heard it compared. What's the dude in DMC5 who summons? There's one of the three characters who summons.
Oh yeah. The dark-haired dude with
V?
the animals.
V?
Yeah, V.
Yeah,
It is V. Yeah.
It's kind of like V, except you're doing a lot more fighting as well. So you're synchronized. Like you do a lot of what are called sync attacks, where as you finish a combo, if your legion is also fighting that same enemy, then there's like a flash on the screen. You trigger that, and you go into like a cool custom animation. Like, but you do actually have to move your legion around with your right stick, or you can command it with L2 just to like shoot to a certain area. So there's a bit of sort of tricky management in actually positioning the legion, positioning you, and like almost like every other Platinum game has been you're one character and you're beating the shit out of stuff. And this throws like a really weird spin on the formula that is really enjoyable, but does take a while to get used to.
Nice. And is it two-player or is it just solo? Because I remember seeing two main characters in a lot of the clips. In the story, you're one of a pair of twins. And the game does have co-op, but strangely enough, in co-op, you don't control the other twin. You actually one person controls the character, one person controls the legion. Oh,
and
that's weird.
And the only controller scheme you can use are the two separate Joy-Cons, like where one person, you each hold a tiny Joy-Con. And I've heard it's terrible. Like I've heard that the co-op is not good. And you don't want to play the co-op.
Okay.
Story wise, whichever twin you choose, the other one becomes like the twin you choose is kind of a blank slate and doesn't actually have dialogue or anything. But the other twin becomes a more bigger part of the story and actually has all the dialogue. It's kind of weird where like I chose the girl, but it's the guy who does all the talking. So it's a bit strange.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. It sounds cool.
Yeah. I'll probably update again next week when I've I imagine finished it. I'm about 10 hours into it, which I have heard it's a lot longer than other Platinum games. They usually only run at about 15 hours, but I've heard this one is quite a lot longer, so maybe I'll get through it.
Is it an alternate ending sort of situation like Nier?
No, I don't think so. That's a fairly Yoko Taro specific thing, whereas this Platinum games tend to be more linear.
Does it rank your combat?
It does, and that's actually another thing I wanted to mention. It has that, like all Platinum games at the end of each sort of combat session will give you a rank from like D to S plus, and this Astral Chain does, but not on the two lowest difficulties. So the game actually starts you off on beginner, and on beginner you don't get any score. you have to bump it up to what's called Platinum Standard to actually get a score. And so I would recommend anyone who can handle Platinum Standard to pop it on that difficulty, because it's still not overly hard, and getting that ranking system does really encourage you to make the most of the depth of the combat rather than just like mashing through every encounter. Having that reward of the rank pushes you to engage more with the game systems. So
I'll tell you what, if I'm going to be wasting time cleaning legions, I need some rewards for that shit. So
there's a lot of cool customization, and like, yeah, there's plenty of cool rewards. So
Ice powers?
no ice powers. Sorry.
Boo.
oh well. Yeah. One day, Adrian. One day. All right. Well, anyway, speaking of things that are pretty cool, let's chat some news.
Now it's time to hear some gaming news. Time for some gaming news.
All right, so this is a bit of a weird one, and I'm just going to kick off tonight by saying I did not expect to be chatting about this week, but here we are. All things considered, this week's been pretty rough in the industry. There's been a lot of shit news flying around. There's been a lot of we're basically going through what it seems to be the equivalent of the video game industry Me Too movement. And honestly, there's been tons of negativity. I want to talk about some fun stuff. Let's chat about some actual game reveals and things that are absolutely batshit freaking crazy. So we got a Yakuza 7 trailer this week. Did not expect to be chatting about Yakuza this week. They've actually just recently had a remaster, I guess, of Yakuza 3 through 5, I want to say.
Yeah, 3, 4, 5, yeah.
3, 4, 5. So this is not what they've done with 1 and 2, where they've done the Kiwami versions. Kiwami sort of meaning extreme. So Yakuza Extreme 1 and 2 was a completely, rebuild from the ground up using a new engine of those games. This is just a remaster of the old PlayStation sort of versions. I think they're PS2 or PS3 games initially. Or it might be both. I'm not entirely sure what the lineage of those is like. But the important thing is now that allows you to play Yakuza 0 right through to 6 on current generation PlayStation, which is the first time that's been the case for Western audiences especially. So that's really cool. But yeah, so they've just announced Yakuza 7. This thing was a shock for multiple reasons. The first and foremost one, and the most obvious one, is that they have completely changed the combat system. And now Yakuza is going to be going turn-based. So this is a game franchise that has pretty much prided itself on the brawling action style of the way fights play out. And it's certainly for quite some time been it ain't broke, so really don't need to fix it sort of situation. They've refined it game after game. They've changed the different fighting styles and the upgrades depending on, which protagonist takes like the lead, or whether they've got additional characters you can play as. Like, you've had in Yakuza 0 you could play as Majima as well as Kiryu, sort of, so you had those two main characters with different styles and all that sort of stuff. But It's been one of those things, like, it's definitely not a bad point in the games. Like, it's not something they really needed to fix. But for whatever reason, like, I don't know if it's the game's creator suddenly became a massive Dragon Quest fan and just went, this is kind of cool. Let's change Yakuza to be this now. They've gone to turn-based combat. And I think that a lot of people are very fucking confused by that. So
sounds cool to me.
Look, I don't have a problem with it. Like, I like those style games with turn-based combat. But I'm just shocked that they did it because it doesn't really make sense.
Did you?
If you know what I mean.
You mentioned Dragon Quest. Do you know like the specific link to Dragon Quest of this announcement?
No. Are you aware of one? Or?
Yeah. So apparently the main like party leader in the game, Ichiban, the character is a huge fan of Dragon Quest, and
right.
and him, the turn-based combat is like the character kind of playing Dragon Quest in real life.
Okay.
And it's a pun in Japanese because the game's title is Yakuza 7 Like a Dragon, and I don't know if you know, but like Yakuza in Japan is called Like a Dragon. It's not called Yakuza in Japan.
Yeah, but that makes sense because the main protagonist up until now, Kiryu Kazuma, has actually been known as the Dragon of Dojima. Like, that's his character name. He has a massive dragon tattoo on his back. There's a huge lineage link to that. But
now that the Japanese title for Yakuza 7 in Japanese is a pun that like Japanese people appreciate on another level, being like Dragon Quest. Is how it sounds to them. So I think that's pretty funny.
That's just, yeah, it's super weird. Like, I'll play it, don't get me wrong. I love the Yakuza games, and the combat, while I love it, is only one facet of it to me. Like, the story and, just the batshit craziness of that setting, appeals to me a great deal. I will miss the combat, though. I'm not going to lie, because I really do like the brawler-style combat. It's super enjoyable. But one advantage I can see happening with this change is that, like, the games have, by necessity, been very much single character focused in terms of the combat, because when you get involved in a brawl, like occasionally in the past games, you have had like a side character who's with you at the time of a fight breaking out, and sometimes they actually do get involved and sort of, get into the action, but they often get in the way. And you certainly wouldn't want to have more than one other, because it would start to get very, very chaotic. But in this manner, you could actually have much more of a party-based system where you've got a group of characters moving around together, and because it's turn-based, it's a lot easier to do that combat without them stepping on each other's toes. So I'm wondering if that maybe is part of the motivation in terms of benefits that they can explore stories with more characters sort of taking the front of the stage. But I don't know. Anyway,
I know that they've said that they're fielding like they want lots and lots and lots of feedback on it, and they've said they're very willing to go back to the brawling action if people aren't happy with this. So it is very much an experiment.
Well, chronologically, it's a reasonable time for them to try something new, because they've broken away from the previous cast of the games, and there's a totally new Yakuza protagonist now whose name is Kusuga, I believe. He has got the most pimpin' fucking afro I've ever seen on a Yakuza. He looks amazing. So, I'm really digging his style. He looks cool. It looks like there's a whole bunch of different enemy types and things as well. But the weirder part about this story is that they actually teased this. They teased this move to a turn-based combat way back on April Fools. They actually, like, Sega first showed off the new Yakuza turn-based battles on April Fools. Everyone assumed, oh, that's really funny. No fucking way. And now they're actually turning that April Fool's joke into reality. And if the stuff that they showed during the clip on April Fools actually is in the game, that's going to be even weirder, because there's stuff in there that is just insane. Like, the protagonist like has a baseball bat, he embeds it in the ground, and the baseball bat sort of, magnetically drags barbed wire onto itself, and he pulls it out like a friggin' Excalibur and starts beating dudes with it. There's a scene where another sort of Yakuza that he's fighting with suddenly runs off and then comes back with a friggin' like steam shovel to join the fight with it, like a front end loader kind of thing. It's just weird. So yeah, check out the trailer. Man, Yakuza is just bizarre, but I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a whole new spin on the craziness. So yeah. Just did not expect it. Anyway.
Well, speaking of some less crazy stuff, so given what the past week has been like, I was trying to find some decent news to go through rather than focusing on the bad, just like Luke mentioned. And I found something that's kind of a mixed bag, because it mostly landed on my radar because of everybody complaining about it. And that was the announcement of Cyberpunk 2077's character customization. And the reason that people were complaining about it was because you don't specify what your gender is. You choose between a male and a female body and a male and a female voice. So you could have a male body but a female voice, and vice versa. And because you're not defining a specific gender, I'm assuming that they basically have no references to it in the gameplay. Which I think's a perfectly cool move. I think that actually fits very well inside of like the Cyberpunk universe, and the fact that everybody can just modify the shit out of themselves. But a lot of these other character customization stuff actually sounds really cool. And this is like, I love role-playing games. I love it when I get to make choices about who my character is, and define their background, define who I want them to be, how I want to play the game. A lot of it reminds me a lot of like the most recent Deus Ex games, and the way that you can kind of character build around that, because they're obviously, fairly similar kind of universe, basically a cyberpunk kind of universe setting that you're playing in. And you get to choose, I'm going to be hyper aggressive in combat, or I'm going to be super sneaky. But yeah, no, the character customization here actually sounds really, really cool. There was a whole bunch of stuff that came out from, I believe it was PAX West, where this was being shown off, and there was
sounds right. Yeah,
a whole bunch of cool stuff that came out of it. They have a really, really cool deep dive video that they were showing of all the gameplay, the ways that you can actually approach different situations and everything. Yeah, no, it's looking really, really cool. I would very much suggest, rather than me explaining to you how the character customization looks, that if Cyberpunk interests you and you've actually not seen the character customization, you should go have a look at it. Because I'm pretty excited, honestly, like having all these different armor outfits that I can have and have my character wear. Hacking system looks really, really cool. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of cool stuff that came out of PAX West.
I think generally the excitement for this game is approaching a level that I haven't seen since the release of GTA 5. That was just an epic release that everybody just, there were tons and tons of people just not going into work that week and playing, the game on launch, and just the conversation just dominated for a while. And I'm expecting a similar thing might happen when this comes out. So
I have actually heard that apparently the demo they showed at Gamescom was garbage.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Apparently it was really bad.
Did you guys? Because they released that footage. It's 40 minutes of gameplay they released.
Yeah.
And I think the main criticism is the gunplay. It seems very slow and kind of limp, and the guns have like no recoil. The animation is pretty basic. The enemies don't really react to the bullets. It seemed very kind of like Fallout, where it's like you're shooting an RPG. It's like you're shooting dice rolls, is what it looks like, instead of like Doom, where it's like sort of more kinetic.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting because they have shown gunplay before, and that certainly wasn't my impression from the first lot they showed, like a little while further back.
It looks different now.
Yeah. I'm not entirely surprised by that, and honestly, I wouldn't be disappointed by it either, right? Like, not that I don't play Fallout for the gunplay, right? Like, you don't play it for that, you play it for the role-playing. And that's the thing that I think they really need to nail, but they're also a studio that, as far as I'm aware, has never done a first-person shooter. So it's not easy to get that right, It
seems a bit more like a first-person RPG with heavy shooter mechanics.
Oh, that's absolutely what it is. Yeah, 100% that's what it is.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's kind of like, you don't play Witcher 3 for the swordplay.
No,
you play it for everything else.
Yeah. On the first-person side of things too, did you see that they have changed? Originally, that cutscenes were in third person, but they've now confirmed that they've changed it so all cutscenes are first person now.
Now, I have a theory about that. I think that actually might tie into the new diverse style of the character creator engine, because the amount of extra sort of editing that they would have to do to incorporate those sort of that huge variety of assets into the cinematics. I wonder if that is part of the motivation behind it, so they can cut down on the work required. So
you still can see your character in third person. I said in driving, in mirrors, and in very limited sequences, you'll see your character in third person. But
which is almost required if you are able to do the character creation stuff, because otherwise, what's the point?
Oh yeah, and in your inventory screen as well, of course. Yeah.
Yeah,
I would say,
do you know what I mean?
And it's coming from purely from a game development perspective, that the reason they decided to do cutscenes in third person and in first person rather than third is more for immersion than it is for anything else.
That's exactly what they said. That's the reason they stated it. So they said it's for immersion.
Because if they were developing this from the very start with a character creation system in mind, then they would have had to account for all that stuff in cutscenes. But having you break away from your character during a cutscene, like, that can break your immersion in the world. So
yeah, fair enough. Cool. Well, I'm still super looking forward to that. So
I'm kind of trying to lay off of getting too excited about it, because I've been burned before Rage 2.
Yeah. Well, I got good news for you, Matt. We got plenty of things to look forward to in the gap. So
that's true.
Yeah.
I only have one thing to say about Cyberpunk: Robo boobies.
Haven't seen things like that since Austin Powers. So yeah. Nice.
So another piece of news, I just want to briefly talk about Capcom teasing a new Resident Evil game. So it's called Project Resistance, and they've confirmed it's for PS4, Xbox, and PC. And there have been a few leaked thumbnails that show what looks like just 4 regular schmucks all like holding weapons, and it looked kind of
us.
Yeah, it looks very Left 4 Dead is what it looks like. So there's no details on what kind of game it is, or whether it's open world or like an online shooter or anything like that. But just based on the screens, everyone is thinking it'll be some sort of Left 4 Dead type survival game, online thingy-majiggy.
Capcom were definitely in a position a few years back where the Resident Evil name did not carry the weight that it now does again since we've had 7 and the 2 remake just absolutely set the world on fire. I'm ready for anything Resident Evil at this point. They could, go out in weird directions and I'd be like, yep, you've got my faith back after the last couple. Fucking let's go. So...
You say that and the next one will be like a mobile gacha game.
Oh, shut up.
Well, they did before, I'm not sure it was before 7, but they had Umbrella Corps, which was like an awful
that was
online
bad.
shooter that just was terrible. A lot of people are also talking about, I never played it, but Resident Evil Outbreak, which was like a spin-off title that was like a co-op survival horror, like an online survival horror spin-off that they made that people have described as like being ahead of its time because I think it was PS2, like you had to play it like most people were playing it on dial-up and there was no way of communicating with the other people who were playing with you. And so when you were trying to do like survival horror puzzles, it was like a nightmare apparently, but I don't know too much about that. So I definitely think it'd be cool if this was more co-op survival horror than co-op shooter, like more Resident Evil than Left 4 Dead would interest me more. But
like the early Resident Evil games where instead of doing the 2 separate playthroughs with the characters individually, you could do it at the same time kind of thing.
That'd be cool. But then again, like that is kind of like the Revelations games, Resident Evil Revelations 1 and 2. They were co-op survival horror, but this is 4 people, so I don't know. It's just going to be Left 4 Dead. It's what it's going to be.
Well, I mean, it sounds like something that we could be into at least. So wait and see. That's cool. Adrian, what weirdness have you got for us tonight? I'm interested.
News time. It's because of Batman.
All right.
You guys, the listeners got it. They
Batman
appreciate
in the
me.
news? Did
Yes.
Batman die?
Batman die.
No, but what did happen is it's a really silly news item because that's all I'm good for. I'm not good at bringing news that people actually want to hear. So instead, this is what you get. A internet gaming cafe in Adelaide ordered 11 Batman gaming chairs for their internet cafe. So these are those sort of very edgelord, like high-backed gaming chairs with like wings on them and like mesh in places that don't need mesh. And they all got stolen. And the Adelaide police put out a fantastic Facebook post saying, calling all caped and non-caped crusaders, we need your help. And there's a very, very clear photo of the man stealing these Batman gaming chairs. And it's just hilarious. It's fantastic. That like they're just the most stupid looking chairs and like some guy just came and nicked them all.
That's awesome.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
What would be better is if the dude was actually dressed as one of the Batman villains.
He looks a little like Hugh Jackman, actually. So I don't know if there's I know Hugh Jackman was back in Australia recently touring. So
It was.
It was Hugh Jackman.
That's a lead, Adrian. That's called
Yeah.
a lead.
Coincidence? I think so.
I would just love to see who they actually caught robbing the place. So
I'm leaving now. I'm leaving. I'm done. Yep, I'm not.
See,
Goodbye. This is me leaving.
when you're describing these chairs, like I can just like vividly imagine it because when I was a kid, I remember having a chair like that. Not specifically like a Batman one, but a chair like that. Adrian's actually gone.
He's gone.
it was too much. I'm apologising because I'm not going to censor myself. But what we are going to chat about now is censorship in general. So censorship in video games. That is our major topic for tonight. And it's probably come at a reasonable time because there's a lot of chatter in the Australian landscape in particular around the issues of video game censorship at the moment. There's a big movement happening currently to prompt elements of the Australian government to sort of take a harder look at the way that censorship laws work in our country in particular. And a lot of the discussions sort of come off the back of some pretty high-profile recent bannings when it comes to games sort of coming to Australia, being refused classification, and all the weirdness that entails when you sort of look at the reasons why they were refused and look at maybe some of the inconsistencies that have risen up as a result of it. So, but censorship in general is something that we've kind of sideways touched on over a number of topics over the years, but we've never really tackled as a concerted effort on our show before. So it might be fun to have a chat about tonight. I thought maybe a good place to start, it would be in terms of the actual logistics around how a game sort of gets submitted to be rated and that kind of thing. That'll give us a base point to start chatting about censorship from. So, Matt, you would obviously have a bit of experience with this, actually having worked on the studio side of things, and I have no doubt that you've seen or gone through this process yourself before to sort of have a game push through those steps to actually release to market. So, are you able to talk a little bit about how that happens and what the studio has to consider when submitting?
Absolutely,
yeah.
It's a nightmare.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us, folks. Good night.
Yeah, no, the whole rating system, especially here in Australia, is really, really difficult. And if you're releasing a game that's going to be, in multiple countries, and guess what? That's most games. You've got to deal with each individual country's own rating system. And that becomes just you literally almost need to hire somebody. This is why you get a publisher, right? Because they deal with all that crap. But if you're a small indie studio, you have to do this yourself. And it means actually making yourself aware of each individual country's own laws and bylaws about what can and cannot be in games and everything like that. And it can just be incredibly difficult to do. In terms of Australia, there is a bunch of weird stuff that isn't allowed in games that catches off big companies all the damn time.
Killing police.
That one I'm not so sure about, actually.
I've heard that one of the in the Australian classification is you're not allowed to be rewarded for killing police officers. You can kill them, but it can't be the objective. But maybe
maybe I don't know about that simply because you have games like GTA that exist and have not had any problems.
I don't think you ever get assigned or there's no missions to kill cops in those. I think
no, they're an obstacle more than anything else. It's when you attack random passerbys, they can sometimes drop money, but I don't think the cops ever do. So
they drop guns and such, and this is the problem, right? There's these really unclear things in the Australian rating system, drug usage is a key one, right? Any sort of drug usage with a positive benefit to it is absolutely a no-no. You can have drug uses in your game, but you can't have any positive benefit to it. And that's just a really weird line to draw. And it's one of those things where Australia's rating system, it was not that long ago that we finally won the battle to get an adult's rating put in. But there's still issues with it. It feels really archaic and you can totally submit a game and then completely get caught out because it's still a judging panel that is having to review your content. And that judging panel could have different opinions from the last judging panel that let through a game that was worse than yours. And every system is pretty much like that. There's new systems going into play that allow you to submit games to be rated internationally, and they kind of handle the whole process for you, which a lot of companies, and you need your publisher or your partner, so like Sony or Microsoft, whatever, you need them to actually support that system. And that's slowly happening, which should make it easier for indies in particular to release games and get them rated. But yeah, basically, bottom line is rating systems are a pain in the ass and horrendous to deal with at all times, especially the Australian one. Not to mention expensive, massively expensive, especially if you get refused classification, then it costs thousands of dollars to reapply.
Oh, so there's actually a cost involved in the application itself as opposed to the actual work that goes on to make sure that your game's up to snuff for
You have to pay them to get it reviewed at all. And I believe Australia is one of the more...
Is that a fixed rate or...?
It's at a fixed rate. I believe it depends on the scale of the company or something like that. It's been a long time since I went through this system, but I remember the Australian rating system is like one of the most expensive ones you can go through. Like, you might pay $100 or so, or a bit more than that for the United States. But here in Australia, to get it rated, you're talking thousands of dollars. So
yeah, and for small indie studios, obviously that's going to be a bigger pill to swallow.
Yep.
In a lot of cases.
Then you have things like Steam who don't give a shit whether or not your game's rated. So,
yeah. So I mean, what is the benefit to actually not rating a game? Is it literally just if you have one single platform that you're planning on releasing on that maybe doesn't care about it, you can save the cost and run the risk of never wanting to have it on another marketplace? Is that kind of where that leaves? Or?
In Australia, if you're an Australian business and you release a game and do not get it rated and it is for sale in Australia, you can be taken to court for not rating your game.
Right, so you want to do it then?
You want to do it. As far as being like an Australian business, as an international indie, if you released your game on Steam, I don't know about the American laws, but if you release your game on Steam without a rating and it was sold in Australia, there's nothing the Australian government can do about that.
Right. And that includes free-to-pay games as well, ones that don't have a shelf price?
Yeah, this is one of the problems with the rating system right now in Australia. It's just that it's so archaic and outdated that it hasn't really accounted for digital sales.
Yeah, it's one of the things that's always fascinated me about rating systems in general when it comes to video games, because like rating movies, people on a panel or a review board or anything like that, they'll have to sit and watch the movie and obviously, take notes about anything that's, borderline that might need to be looked at and discussed, further, that kind of thing. But, you can be done watching a movie in, under 3 hours, typically. A game, the amount of time resource that would need to be spent to actually, go through at a level of detail where you can be sure that you can, pull out anything that might be questionable, that's a ridiculous investment in time and effort for some games.
What the rating boards typically do is they put the onus on the developer to tell them everything in the game that would potentially be an issue.
Right.
So you're not giving them you do provide them a build of the game, but they won't play through the whole thing. Like imagine giving them Red Dead Redemption 2 and asking them to play the full game to find all the things in there that are bad. Like no, like Rockstar will provide them with a list of all the potentially offensive moments. And provide them with a build of the game as well, and basically let them rate from there.
Right, interesting. And what if something gets missed and discovered later? Is there penalties involved for the company submitting, or
penalties? Not as far as I'm aware, but that shit happens all the time.
Yeah, I imagine it would, because some of the things that would be sensitive that might otherwise be overlooked because it seems like, oh no, this is obviously okay. Oh wait, it's not okay. Cool.
Yeah, it happens all the time. Like it's just a matter of getting re-rated. But it hasn't happened in a while. Not that I've seen highly publicized, at least. But like the whole hot coffee thing was a really good example of that happening.
Okay,
that was GTA San Andreas.
Yeah,
where they Rockstar did they say it was accidental?
It was a thing that they were messing around with in the game where there were potential sex scenes that you could unlock. They were very crude
sex scenes.
Yeah, they were very, very crude. Like you could see that they weren't completed at all. A modder found these still in the game files, made a mod that made them available to players. So in the base game, you could not get into that without a mod. But because it was able to be modded in and the content was there, even if it wasn't accessible to players, the game had to be re-rated.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah.
Now that begs another question, because we live in a world now where, we've got a lot of games that get expanded upon like massively after release, and, DLC is a thing, and, games as a service, especially, being something that shows an ever evolving landscape when it comes to certain games. Do games need to be re-rated as a whole when stuff like that gets bolted on, or does each DLC have to be rated individually? How does that actually work? Do you have any idea, or is that completely outside of the scope of what the system currently caters for?
I would say the system totally caters for that sort of thing right now. That again, like if you're the game developer making that choice, why would you do that to yourself? Like if your game is a mature rated, like let's say for example, I've got Destiny 2, I've released that, I'm Bungie in this example. I've released Destiny 2 out to the masses and everything. I'm on this online game. I've decided that my next expansion is all about Guardian sex. And now I have to get the game re-rated as an adult rating. Why would I do that? Like, why would I go through every international rating system to put that in? Like, it'd be, no, that's basically outside the scope. Because I'm horny.
Because now it's finally better than Warframe.
Interesting.
But Luke, the Australian system definitely does have some consideration for DLC, because one of the recent titles that got refused classification was an expansion for Kingdom Come Deliverance called A Woman's Tale or A Woman's Life. And it's like you're kind of playing as a female protagonist in that same medieval world, and there's a depiction of like sexual violence in it that got it refused classification, and so that as a DLC, so that does exist in Australia certainly.
Yeah, I guess my sort of follow-up question to that is more from the consumer angle as well, because I think, classifications by and large serve to inform the consumer when it comes to the product that they're acquiring, particularly if you've got, adults purchasing for minors. And I think that things get really, really muddy when it comes to DLC, because I think that the level of educated consumer out there is really low when it comes to identifying the impacts of different classifications, particularly when it's not made obvious. Like if you've got an add-on to a game and the game itself is rated at a lower sort of classification than perhaps the add-on is, that I just don't see that being picked up on by like 99% of people. I really don't. I think it's, it's almost like a kind of nod without any teeth, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It just, I mean, I don't know.
Literally, I mentioned Steam and their rating system. Like in Steam, I don't have to show any proof that we got our game rated in a specific country. I can go in there and choose from a drop-down list what it is rated in any given country, which basically means that a parent could go and buy my game that I've said is totally E for everyone, and actually it contains a whole bunch of sex and violence. Like,
yeah.
And then that would become Steam's problem to actually remove me from the store if I were to do that thing. But it's all just on the developer's end to do that. And like, as a parent, like, are you sitting down with your child whenever they want to buy something from Steam and looking at the ratings on there? And quite often there will be no ratings to look at. So what do you do in that situation?
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. The other thing that I often wonder about when it comes to ratings, particularly in a retail sense, is how is this stuff actually enforced? Like, I know with cinemas in particular, like it's typically at the box office itself that it's enforced. Like if you go and try and buy tickets for an R-rated film, you might get carded when you're purchasing the tickets at the ticket counter. But when it comes to actually walking into the theatre, they don't tend to check then. It's only at the point of purchase. So, you could quite easily go and buy tickets for yourself and a minor, and then both of you walk through and the ushers, tear your stubs, and that's pretty much it. But I imagine that there would be some sort of body that checks on, retailers doing the right thing and not actually directly selling them to minors. But when it comes to anyone purchasing on behalf of someone, there'd be absolutely nothing to stop them. It's a completely, impossible to enforce, guideline. If a parent makes a choice to buy, an R-rated game and let their kid play it, then that's kind of where, the store has, dusted their hands of it, and they're no longer responsible for that outcome, are they? So
just like movies and TV.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, is that the same with alcohol? I'm pretty sure there's still laws around that could prevent parents from allowing kids to have alcohol below a certain age. I know it's a little less restrictive than the legal onus on retailers or sellers of alcohol. I think there's a separate law around it. I don't know what it is, but there's still a law in place. Yeah.
Here's a tidbit. I actually used to work at EB Games when I was younger. And when I first picked up the job, the fear of God was put in me, because if I were to ever sell an adult-rated game or an M-rated game to a minor, I would be held responsible.
Right.
And so whenever you had a parent coming in that was buying a game, you would have to ask them, like, if they were buying GTA and they came over to the counter to purchase it, you would have to ask who they were buying it for. And if they said they were buying it for their kid, you would have to ask them, how old is your kid? Because this is a rated game at this rating, whatever. And you would basically have to question them, because if they took that game and, took it home and then their kid got freaked out or they saw that it had adult content, you would be held responsible even if you warned them against doing that. And that would be where it would be on your manager to basically stand up for you and say, no, they did actually question you about this and everything like that. It is all on the retailer to enforce those rules, which makes the whole digital sales situation very unusual, because there isn't that in between. It's just a gigantic conglomerate. So
There's a lot of assumptions made there, though, because, I mean, I've bought many R-rated games as an adult and never had any questions sort of posed to me by the retailer as to, whether this is for me or not. So...
Yeah, I mean, again, that's all on the person that's serving you, right? And certainly if I were in their position, I would be questioning the hell out of you because it'd be like, I don't want to get a massive fine.
Yeah, fair enough. Oh, I mean, what do you guys think about this sort of state of censorship in terms of, is it something that you think actually belongs in some sort of shape or form? Would you prefer it didn't exist at all? Adrian, I'm actually curious to hear your thoughts.
Give me the games. Give me. And I don't know. It's hard. I do support censorship. I think it exists for a reason, and I think perhaps video game censorship might be a result of like an outdated system, or like like the laws can't keep up with the modern sort of video game industry. I don't know a lot about it, and I was very fortunate in that when I was a youngster, my mum let me have access to anything I wanted. So she never censored me when I wanted to watch something R-rated or whatever. So I've never really been on the end of having much to complain about, to be honest. So if I was buying, a game that was not suitable for kids, then I probably wouldn't give it to kids. And perhaps the rating system would inform me of that. But I also feel like, if you're an adult of sound mind, you could make that call without a rating system. So maybe it's not necessary? I don't know.
Interesting.
I'm definitely on the it's not necessary side. I think game classification is fine and important, and I think games classification should be perhaps even stricter than it is now and more robust. Definitely, there could be a lot of improvements made to the classification system, but I think that unless a game breaks an existing law, so like unless a game, for example, breaches someone's privacy or contains like child pornography, something like that, I don't believe that any game should be like refused classification or outright banned. That's where I stand.
All right, Matty, do you have sort of consumer thoughts of your own?
Yeah, my perspective, I'm kind of with Adrian. Like, I think it's a really complicated issue. There's some games that, like, I think the full extent of the rating system needs to be applied, right? Like, if a game is going to be refused classification, then it probably shouldn't be refused classification. It should probably be put in the R+, 18+ rating, right? Like,
Can I quickly interrupt? I misunderstood. I was thinking classification, not censorship. So I agree.
Sure, I was wondering about that. Yeah.
I agree completely with Christian then. Yeah, absolutely no censorship, but yes, the classification.
Yeah,
sorry.
Yeah, that's basically my perspective. Like, I don't want to see things censored because as an adult, I should be able to purchase what I want that's within the law, but things need to be classified in such a way. And then the difficulty then becomes, like, if we're letting in that content, how are we making sure that it's not getting to kids, right? Because you don't want to restrict adults from being able to get access to that stuff, but you want to be able to restrict kids from getting access to it. And I think
give it to them.
My take on that is that I think that there should be even an adults only rating for games, and the same rules that apply to selling like pornography should apply to those games. So they should not be allowed to be sold in a video game store. You should have to go to like a sex shop or whatever if you want to. If you want to get seriously, like if you want to get like an actual porn game, then you should go to a sex shop, but it should be available there.
Yeah, isn't the R18+ rating basically that? Like,
well, it catches a lot of things though. It's not just sex. Like the R+ rating is designed to capture a whole bunch of spectrums around like violence and
drug use. Drug use is the big one in Australia.
Yeah. Well, actually, interestingly, it seems like I'm just looking at some of the guidelines across the different categories. So in Australia, in particular, we have a G rating, we have a PG rating, we've got an M rating, an MA 15+, and then an R 18+ restricted. Now,
no X. X is the missing one compared to pornography.
Yeah, no X. But it's amazing how little actually changes between a lot of those standards. So, when it comes to the G rating, drug use should be implied like only very discreetly. But from PG onwards, drug use is permitted. So I guess the key there is just, within the Australian standards, that whole mechanic around drugs providing an in-game benefit is kind of the thing that's still looked at as the deal breaker. But across every single standard, nudity is permitted. So even in G-rated games, nudity is okay, apparently. So the violence level that's permitted does tend to ratchet up a little bit. So starting off at G, where violence should only have like a low sense of threat or menace and absolutely no sexual violence. But then you go up, incrementally. So, PG, violence should be mild and infrequent. M, moderate violence is permitted. MA is pretty much, violence is okay. And then, R-rated. Yeah,
it's making judgments on those definitions. That's the truth.
It's all super subjective. Yeah, exactly.
That's the problem. Yeah. Because that's what I mean. You can have one rating board that's like, well, it's this, but then the next will disagree with that.
One thing with censorship, as far as modification to games go, 'cause that's a way that a lot of games come out. In Australia, sometimes is they'll be released, but they'll be modified in some way. And my attitude is generally I'd rather have nothing. I would actually rather not play a game than play a modified version of a game. And I know that some people will think that's petty or overreacting, but I hate the idea of playing a game where I feel like I'm being patronized, and it grinds my gears.
It's like altering art sort of thing.
Yeah. A part of the problem, because I agree with you, honestly, I would rather not play it if it's been modified, because quite often those modifications aren't going to be good. And I think a good example of that is Left 4 Dead 2.
That's exactly what I was thinking of too, yeah.
Because that was modified for Australia, and the modifications were super garbage. It actually impacted on the gameplay in a really major way compared to kind of the visceral feeling that you got when you were playing that in the American version, which I'm pretty sure I still have installed. That is less than ideal when it's that way. I do think there's some games that do need censorship, and for the most part, it is literally these games should probably not see the light of day. There's some games that just the content is there any value to it is kind of the question.
To you though, right?
That's to me, yes. But if somebody went and made a game, there's key examples that are the game that was released and then taken down off of Steam where you could play a school shooter.
Hatred?
Yeah.
No, not Hatred. Hatred's a different example.
It was a more recent one. This is a couple of years ago. I know what you're saying. For example, Postal and Postal 2 were refused classification in Australia. And that was in 2012, in a time where, the saturation of media coverage around the US sort of gun control problems has not been a theme at that time, but it is super a theme now. So as a product of its time, it was questionable. But in today's climate, holy shit, that'd be an instant no. Let's not have games like this. I mean, this is getting away from the whole debacle discussion around do video games actually lean into violence and the bullshit take a lot of media outlets have on that to serve particular political agendas. And I think we're all probably strongly of the view that no, that is not a direct correlation in any way, shape or form. What are you fucking talking about? But I mean, even so, I think that there are certain themes that for taste reasons alone should just be no-go zones. So yeah.
I disagree.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, no, I think that, like I said, as long as a game isn't actually breaking on the book's law, no matter how distasteful it is, I don't think it should be banned. I think that if platforms want to delist or refuse to host those games, that's fine. So a school shooting game, if Steam says no thanks, or if any platform holder says no thanks, then that's fine.
That's true. Individual stores have made that call in the past. I know Target's actually chosen not to sell a few different things.
But as far as legal status go, I think that it should be permissible.
Fair. Yeah. Okay.
My favorite example of censorship is the PUBG censorship in China on mobile.
Oh yes.
I don't know if you've seen this, but it's when you kill someone on PUBG Mobile in China, the person throws you a present and waves goodbye.
Yeah.
Instead of dying. It's the best.
They even changed the name of the game to something like I can't remember what it is, but it's something like happy time or something stupid like that.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
Player unknown happy time. That's great.
Yeah.
Holy crap. Yeah, it's amazing, like the list of games that have actually sort of initially been refused classification in Australia. And, you can point a finger to a lot of them being the pre-18 plus classification being available sort of era. Because if they couldn't be rated 18, then there's a lot that just, got caught by the net and were blocked entirely. But, like quite a few of them, as you were mentioning, have actually gone through alterations to change some item of content to bypass the reason so they could actually get put out on sale, and that's largely been a developer or a publisher decision to actually go ahead and do that.
Most of the games on that list I think should not have been refused classification. I think most of the reasons they've been banned is kind of bullshit, honestly. Like the example that I was giving about games that should be censored is a really extreme one, because most of the time, like, I find with creatives, they don't typically make that content. And if somebody does make that content, it's usually some guy in a basement somewhere that, is making this and doesn't exactly have massive backing. So he would probably never get the thing rated. But, certainly in a very extreme circumstance, like, I think that'd be valuable. But nothing in the current list of refused classification games stands out to me as saying they should have been refused classification.
The one that stood out to me as a weird conversation was actually when We Happy Few got refused classification in Australia initially. Because this is one of those cases where, like, there is actually a context that matters, because it involves drug use that is related to incentives and rewards. But the whole fucking theme of that game is about the insidious and bad impacts and nature of a drug-fueled society. Like, the entire message is basically the complete opposite of that, like teaching people drugs are bad. But in context, apparently that didn't matter. It was just the individual instances of the mechanics that got looked at.
So the problem with that is that to absorb that narrative, they would need to play the game, right? And so without having that delivered to them, they're seeing like, okay, so you take pills a lot, and the pills do things to change the game environment that is positive, so you'll want to take the pills. That's bad. You're refused classification. But you're right, because the narrative of that game is about the danger of that sort of thing. I completely agree. Like, it's what makes ratings so hard to do, because the examples that I was giving are also like that's massively subjective.
Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, as a parent, I often do worry about sort of, my kids' grandparents in particular, sort of, not understanding game ratings and picking something up and letting my sons play it that is absolutely, something that should be off limits. GTA has been a repeat offender.
Yeah.
So I've had to explain to the grandparents, don't let the boys play Grand Theft Auto. I explain to them why, but often, there'll be times where they just don't care and they let the kids do what they want.
Look, I'm curious, if your boys asked for any particular games that you've had to say, no, it's not appropriate?
Yeah, absolutely. Some good examples were actually God of War is probably the most recent one. So my kids have both been really keen to play God of War, and I've said no because in terms of some of the themes and just some of the level of violence, I wasn't comfortable with that just yet. Yeah. There will come a time where I'm definitely happy for them to do it because it's a freaking awesome game. But I also want to be a responsible parent and, make sure that I pick my time correctly for that. So, yeah.
Yeah, okay. I'll be sure to slip your kids God of War when you're not
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, it's a tough call. Like, especially when you want, minors to be able to enjoy something. And, in today's day and age, there's a lot of things on TV that are arguably a lot worse. But I don't know. I always take either be part of the experience so you can guide them through it. And I think that's definitely my approach to YouTube because, it's a lot harder to restrict what kids watch on YouTube these days because YouTube's terrible at, barring that kind of content itself. So you kind of need to be involved or, be very vigilant with checking the watch history. So, or just be part of it with them. I think, you can't prevent it. So try and guide it as best as you can. You just be that presence, I think. You kind of have to accept it to a certain extent, but just make sure that you're aware of what's going on.
Yeah, because
it's hard.
I'm with Christian. Like in an ideal world, we could rely on businesses to choose what content they sold, and whether or not they sold something would be their choice, right? But then a lot of people will also argue that if games are art, then any store would be an art gallery, and why would you ever not put something on there? It's super fucking complicated. And at the same time, like, I don't know if I trust a lot of stores to make the right decision with a lot of those games, right? Like Steam has flip-flopped a lot on sexual content. And you know, that's really, it's hard to control that stuff and to decide like what is and is not the content that belongs on your store. And, you know, it's almost a mistake to say that government is in any better a position to make that decision. They're probably way worse off.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think leaving it to people outside of the industry is always going to result in a bad outcome to a certain extent.
It's basically on developers and storefronts to be responsible, and I think a lot of the time people fuck it up.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, perhaps a final question to sort of end on for everyone. There's been a lot of discussion in recent years around the issues of gambling and monetization in games that should be very much sort of signposted as being something that minors shouldn't have easy access to. Where do you think that should stand in a classification system? Do you think we should actually have an additional addendum to classifications or a classification all of its own for games with monetized content so that, you know, adults who are potentially buying for minors are aware of that impact? Or do you think that is, you know, something that is ultimately doomed to fail no matter what? So what do you think?
That's a damn good question, and I think that as far as I know, there is actually already a place for gambling references within the classification system, but that's usually like the depictions of gambling, I guess, rather than are you spending real money? And I guess I think that it should be included in the classification if there's gambling elements, like real life gambling elements of putting money in for chance. Then I think that should. Would you
rather it be a factor that bumps the game up or down on the existing system, or something that's identifiable separately?
That's, I don't know, up or down, I guess, or it would only be going up then, wouldn't it? But yeah, I think that if something has like an actual poker game should be classified, you know, as having like being a gambling game, and that should be part of the classification. Otherwise, would a poker game be G-rated because it's just people sitting at a table? No, it's because there's gambling going on. So
yeah,
it's easy. You just chuck it under the R18 category because you have to be 18 to go into a casino.
Yeah,
I agree. If you're gambling with real money in the game, then yeah. Sure, definitely.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The thing that throws a wrench into all of this discussion is basically the fact that digital stores aren't beholden to any one country's laws, and so they have no obligation to properly represent that unless a government holds them to account. And so like
which has happened before with Valve in particular.
And so like I would love to see like iconography on physical games that actually made it clear that if it had like microtransactions or gambling elements in it, then that should basically be very clear on that. But how do you put that on a digital product is kind of the question.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a nightmare. Yeah. No, not to mention that if you're acquiring a product digitally, you know, you probably got the payment gateway all set up and ready to go there. So the next step is remarkably more open to be exploited.
This is primarily as well. Like I've not seen how Epic publishes things, so I can't speak for Epic. But it's primarily a problem with Steam, because they don't have any sort of enforcement of that. Whereas like Nintendo, Microsoft, and Sony take that shit very seriously, and so you have to do it properly through them.
Yeah, absolutely. Even things like the Apple sort of App Store these days is really sort of locked down on that after a couple of big legal issues they had. So they've got like massive amounts of multi-factor authentication in place now, and all sorts of things to prevent apps from, you know, having buttons where things can accidentally be purchased. So yeah, it's the landscape's definitely changed in recent years. I'm just curious as to how much further it's yet to go before we're at a place that I think it works.
Yeah,
so
we're ways off.
Yeah. All right, well, cool. Yeah, good chat, guys. That's an interesting topic, that one. It's the conversation around classification, I feel, is going to be very different in a few years' time with some of the themes that have started getting pretty strong at the moment, and see where that all leads. But yeah, by then my kids will hopefully be old enough that I don't have to worry about it as much. That'll be good. All right. Well, anyway, what's on this week? We've got tons of shit happening at the moment. Do we want to chat about our plans for our replacement of our good old Party Game of the Month segment, which would normally have been tonight's episode, we should point out. So the first episode of the month has in the past been Party Game of the Month, but we're going to be doing something a little bit different in future. So we're going to be doing a bit of a combo stream and then sort of chat about the games that we're going to stream on the show. Very similar to our sort of cadence for the Party Game of the Month reviews, but this is going to be stuff that we're going to curate a little bit more closely in order to provide the best sort of impact and experience with us actually streaming the game and playing together. So Adrian and Christian, we kind of decided on what the first one's going to be. Do you want to chat about what that is now?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So sometime in the coming month, Adrian and I are going to play and stream Dead Space 3.
Hey.
Hooray!
And Luke and I will hop in and watch.
Yeah. Our understanding is that it's designed to be played primarily co-op. And I've played both Dead Space 1 and 2 and really enjoyed it. So yeah, I'm keen to see what the experience is like.
Yeah,
nice.
So dear listeners, keep an eye out on all of our socials. We haven't quite nailed down the exact date yet. But we will announce with plenty of lead time the date and time of our stream when we decide what it is.
Yeah,
I can't promise that there won't be squealing in fear during the stream. So.
Perfect. That's exactly what we want.
I really want for that stream setup to find a way that we can actually see both your perspectives, because that game does some really cool stuff.
Interesting.
I'm confident we can play around with it a bit. I've got some ideas. So yeah. It'll be a good time, whichever way we set it up. But we'll all be on deck to sort of enjoy and chat about that. And then, of course, we'll actually chat about it as a proper segment on the show after the fact and do like a post-mortem in effect. Yeah, and chat about it. So that the idea is that we'll do those post-mortem episodes on the same rotation as what we've been doing previously. So hopefully the first episode of each month, and the stream will take place as per an evolving schedule when we can actually get together to do the thing. But we'll telegraph it way ahead of time so people can jump in and enjoy. But it should be a good time. I'm looking forward to it. Dead Space is a awesome first pick.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's gonna be a good time. But in the meantime, this week I'm going to play some Control. I'm going to tear myself away from Destiny and actually play something else because I've got a ton of stuff to get through before Gears 5 drops, before Borderlands 3 drops, before... I actually do want to play Astral Chain as well, Christian, so I don't know how I'm going to cram that in. This month's going to just be nuts, so I don't know. Matt, you finished Control now. What's next? What are you moving on to?
I've been playing a whole bunch of Fire Emblem, and I'll probably put a whole bunch more time in that and have something to talk about next week, so... Nice.
Yay.
Gentlemen, Adrian, you've got some Destiny stuff still to work through, I'm assuming. So
yeah, I mean, in true Adrian nature, I usually just tend to focus on one game at a time. So because I'm already on that wave, I'll just continue riding it until I'm sick of it again.
Yep. And then Shadowkeep comes out, and then we go through all of it again.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, nice. And Christian, you still got a bit to go with Astral Chain, so yeah,
still got plenty to go with Astral Chain, and then. I'm not sure. I think there's something I'm forgetting that comes out between now and Death Stranding that I want to pick up. But Death Stranding is definitely the next big one on the horizon for me.
Yeah. I'm sort of slightly tempted to check out Man of Medan as well.
I've heard good things about that.
Yeah, it's by the same folk who did Until Dawn, but I just don't know if that's going to work its way into the schedule. It's going to be a tricky one. We've got tracks coming up.
I do want to try Control, so...
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. All right, well, anyway, let's talk, we'll play, let's get to it. We've got things to do. Thank you, everybody, for listening. You can get hold of us at all the usual places, so mail@partyloaded.com. Check us out on Facebook, just search Party Loaded, @PartyLoadedShow on Twitter, and everything linked through the main hub at channelendgame.com. You can find our Twitch and our YouTube from there. Thanks for enjoying the show. Hope you have. And we'll see you back again for another helping in 7 days' time. But from all of us, that's it. Good night.
Good night.
Enjoy. We'll see you then. The Party Loaded podcast is a Channel Endgame production. For this and more great gaming content, bookmark channelendgame.com.